In cooperation with the station to which you are listening, the Office of Price Stabilization presents another edition of Your Pocketbook, a weekly transcribed feature. Tonight's guest on Your Pocketbook is Mr. Schuyler Patterson of the Regional Director's Office in the Office of Price Stabilization. Mr. Patterson.
Today, let's go back into a little not-too-ancient history. Let's cast our memories back about 10 years or less, say 9 years. How many of you who are listening recall when sirloin steak was selling for 31 cents a pound? That was the price in 1942 and for some time thereafter. It was the best steak, too. Just consider what $1 would buy for you in the way of meat then. You could get 3 pounds of steak. Imagine that, 3 pounds of steak for just $1. And you'd get some change besides. Those surely were the good old days. But they're gone now. Gone together with the 5-cent telephone call, the 3-cent bar of candy, and the 8-cent loaf of bread. But let's not dismiss those good old days so quickly. Perhaps we are passing right now through what we may recall as the good old days in another few months or years. It is true that, right now, some steaks cost as much as $1.39 a pound. It is also true that local telephone calls are 10 cents each. Candy bars have increased in price. All of this seems rather expensive. But have you seen the recent dispatches from Chicago? The traction lines out there are asking a 20-cent streetcar fare. In support of this request, they are reciting the mounting costs of operation, of all the materials they buy. Who knows? They may get it. People who live in Chicago may be paying 40 cents a day just to get downtown to their places of business and back home again. These are just a few samples of inflation. Given the increased transit fares, even higher and higher prices for those steaks, mounting prices for clothing, possibly a few rent boosts, there is no telling what is going to happen to your dollar. You see, there is never any limit to what inflation can do. I have in my possession a Chinese $1,000 bill, issued about 1945. I got it while I was in the Navy. It is a very pretty and official-looking piece of paper, has all sorts of pretty engraving on it. There was a time when such a piece of Chinese currency would have been worth about 330 United States dollars. You could have bought a lot of things with it. But when I got it, it was worth about 1/10 of a cent, as far as purchasing power was concerned. Inflation had made that banknote truly more worthless than the paper on which it was printed, and it never can nor will be worth more than it is today. Only once in this country's history has truly deflated currency regained its real value again. Before World War I, steak sold for as little as 19 cents a pound. Good steak. Prices doubled during that war, so did some wages. But when all was said and done, no one, with the exception of a favored few, were any better off after that war than they were before. As fast as earnings increased, so did prices. Economists tell us that our dollar today is worth only 55 cents, as compared with its buying power of some 10 years ago. If inflation runs riot for the next 5 or 6 years, or even less, they foresee another loss in buying power. Should we see the same decrease in dollar value in, say, the next 6 years, we will be paying almost $1 for a pack of cigarettes, for the dollar will be worth only 30 cents. There you have the reasons for an effective and equitable system of price controls. There are a lot of people who pooh-pooh all of this. They advocate letting events shape their own course. They are against controls of any sort, saying that higher and higher prices will bring forth goods and commodities. Well, let's see what happened in China, that place where the $1,000 bill finally became worth 1/10 of a cent. As prices mounted in China, the farmers refused to sell food to the cities. They did this purposely. They expected, and rightly as it turned out, that if they held on to their food products for a few more days, the bidding would become stronger. They knew the city dwellers had to eat, so a bushel of rice, mounted first by the dollars, then by the hundreds of dollars, and finally by the thousands and the millions. Well, we all know what has happened in China since. Let no one ever forget that inflation is a disease, like cancer, which, unless checked, finally destroys the body economic in which it is lodged. This has been the course throughout world's history. Mark Connolly, in his play The Green Pastures, actually emphasizes the fact that the Old Testament is very largely a recital of economic inflations and depressions. The interlude through which we are passing now is as old as the history of man. But today there is some benefit gained from these experiences. There are authoritative voices in the land warning us against a similar debacle. Director Eric Johnson of the Economic Stabilization Agency said only the other day that uncontrolled inflation can cost every American family $1 a day from now on. That is $360 a year. In terms of national figures, it means that an extra $35 million a day is going to be spent. For what? Not for anything tangible. Not for any added advantages insofar as the average man is concerned. He'll be like the character in Alice in Wonderland, who had to run faster and faster to stay where he was. It's nice if you like that form of exercise. But let's see what is going to happen to this extra $35 million a day. For one thing, it totals about $12,600 million a year. That would ordinarily be more than enough to pay the interest on the national debt of which we have heard so much. But the federal government has scarcely begun to spend for this present emergency. We are told that the bill for rearmament will run to more than $5 billion a month beginning about the 1st of October. That amounts to $60 billion a year. And we have no idea how long it will be necessary to keep this up. Furthermore, if inflation takes place, this $5 billion a month will buy less and less as time goes on. A year from now, it may have to be $7 or $8 billion a month to obtain what $5 billion does today. Of course, you can say, well, we'll get higher wages. But some, but not all of you may. But they won't buy anything more. Those of us who are led to believe that inflation holds anything for the average man are like the mules that are led to run faster and faster because bags of oats have been tied out in front of their heads just out of reach. They run and run all day to catch up with those bags of oats, but the faster they go, the faster the oats get away from them. They just exhaust themselves and never get what they want. Anyone who tells us that we can overtake an inflationary dollar is putting us in the position of those mules. Critics of price freezes assert that inequities have developed since the original price action in January. That is only partially true and was understood beforehand. That original price freeze was not intended to be a permanent instrument. Many prices were caught in badly distorted relationships. Continuation of the stopgap rules which were put into effect then would have been neither fair nor feasible. For one thing, it would have been unfair to those whose sales prices had not yet been fully adjusted to rising costs. Here especially, it would have penalized those who had attempted to comply with the government's appeal for voluntary price stabilization. In addition, it could have impeded production and distribution. Something had to be done to relieve those inequities. It was not easy to move from a general price freeze to what might be called tailored price structures. In other words, it is not easy to place price ceilings on all of some hundreds of thousands of products and commodities overnight. That calls for the detailed work of experts over a long period. The first step was to call a halt. Then, to continue the metaphor, to dress the line so that every man had proper room on all sides. That is not easily done. It is a highly complex process. For that reason, the Office of Price Stabilization utilized a number of interim regulations to serve until more precise ceilings could become practicable. For manufacturers, for example, the formulas used generally permitted them to add to their pre-Korean prices the increases which had taken place in their materials and labor costs up to a certain date. Prices for distributors gave them markups, which could be added to inventory costs. The formulas for manufacturers were designed to establish a better balanced price structure, which would give relief to those manufacturers who had lagged behind, while at the same time rolling back prices that had run ahead of cost increases. In extending the Defense Production Act for the month of July, however, the Congress included a proviso that during that month no price ceiling should become effective which was lower than the price ceiling on June 30th. In accordance with this, the Office of Price Stabilization issued its General Overriding Regulation 13, suspending all price ceilings, increases as well as decreases, which would have become effective under these formulae regulations after June 30th. Manufacturers affected by this suspension will continue to price their products under the regulations previously applicable. In other words, they revert to the original general freeze. This suspension is merely a stopgap measure. It awaits the terms of the extension now being considered. The Office of Price Stabilization has strongly recommended that Congress, in enacting the extension, permit those rollbacks to take effect so that a balanced price structure may be maintained. Otherwise, it will become necessary to raise the entire price level to the height of those prices which have gone up the most in the past year. Adoption of these rollbacks was halted by the month-long extension granted by Congress. It has seemed to the Office of Price Stabilization that these rollbacks were necessary to effect operation of Stabilization Authority. Sales of most other food will eventually be placed on the same basis as meat. There will be definite ceiling prices for each category and grade posted in each store. In the meanwhile, regulations have been issued covering so-called dry groceries, which affect 60% of the food items in the country's 500,000 retail stores. These are modeled after certain OPA wartime regulations, which were particularly effective. These regulations provide specific percentage margins for 38 food categories. Retailers are placed in 4 groups, which are gauged according to type of operation. Smaller margins are permitted for the chain stores and the supermarkets. As a result of these regulations, there have been removed many of the squeezes, excessive margins, and other inequities which arose during the January freeze. Less than 2 weeks ago, in what appeared to be a beautifully timed utterance, we were offered the possibility of an armistice in Korea, a possibility which now gives promise of fulfillment. This offer came at just the psychological moment when Congress was considering appropriations for rearmament, the maintenance of anti-inflation barriers, the conduct of major programs for the future. Whether or not this offer was made at that particular moment just to confuse us, we can only guess at this time. But we can be on guard. Today, democracy truly stands at the crossroads. No outside force need attack us if we will willingly oblige by destroying our own economy. But if each of us strives to do something for his neighbor, if we will maintain our standards of living, maintain the prosperity and liberty under which we have lived, we must exercise control and caution. We must think in national terms, in terms of the good of the nation. It is to that purpose the Office of Price Stabilization is dedicated. It is for the general public interest that it may operate effectively. This can only be accomplished with the help of every man, woman, and child in the nation. That means you.
You have just heard a transcribed address by Mr. Schuyler Patterson of the Office of Price Stabilization. The battle against inflation is everybody's battle, and you can help us win. Just remember that whatever you buy, whenever you buy wisely. Your pocketbook, edited and produced by Bill Seilig, is a weekly presentation of the Office of Price Stabilization. This is Sybil Crane speaking.